we going? And it's so nice to see, even with great opposition, as there has been around some of the periphery of the expo. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it has to do with that interesting set of stuff going on out front of the hotel. I mean, talk about the dichotomy brought down to reality of the light and the dark. And what you don't know is the lies that those folks outside have been led to believe, because most of those people are well-meaning people who are on the wrong side, not because they want to be, but because they have been misled. They think they're fighting for the light because the people who are leading them have darker designs, and it's going to be interesting to see how many of those people actually come in here and listen and partake of what's going on and realize that maybe they got it a little bit wrong. That was kind of like a footnote. What I was going to make is...
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, but that's really important, what Richard's saying. I don't mean it, but it's really important. Take to heart what Richard's saying, because he's really complimenting the magnificence of you people, because we know the in or out in dynamics of what's occurring, and that's a great compliment to you from Richard.
Thank you, Daniel. My point about where we are now versus where we were a year ago is that I can see extraordinary change in the mainstream culture. I'm a kind of a mainstream culture nut. I watch television a lot. Drives Robin nuts. I watched Friends. I liked Friends. So I guess I know where I'm going.
It's not funny. It's something funny.
If you want to talk to the culture in which you live, you have to understand the culture in which you live. What's interesting to me is that I'm watching incredible dynamic change at the level of the mainstream. To give you one clear example, that we're not approaching this interesting nodal point, we're in it. We're right in it. And I love, Daniel, your metaphorical phrase about raising sail. Because I love sailing. I love ships. You know, we are on a cosmic voyage from the moment we're born forever. I mean, it doesn't stop just because you're not here. And that metaphor is so appropriate because a lot of people in the mainstream world have not yet raised their sails. But they will. Change is upon us. There is a tremendous dynamic change that's upon us. And I'll give you one clear example. Before 2000 and the election of George Bush, kind of, over Al Gore, kind of, this culture had certain mindsets. And those mindsets particularly were triggered by the events of 9/11, which then allowed the stampede, the cascade, where almost every person in the House and Senate gave George Bush carte blanche to do whatever he wanted and the folks around him wanted to do. We're seeing a very similar pattern leading from Iraq now to Iran. But there's one stunning difference. Everybody's asking questions. Nightly, Chris Matthews, a mainstream icon that I kind of really like, is running on that program comparison, side-by-side video of George Bush utterances prior to Iraq and now George Bush utterances prior to Iran. And he's making the point we're being led down a path. Somebody is beating the drum beats. They're using the same fear tactics, the same spinning of evidence, etc. But let's not follow this goat over that cliff this time. And this isn't those of us on this panel speaking. This is a mainstream guy. You watch Keith Olbermann, who has the most interesting newscast on television. I mean, he is by far light years ahead of the Cronkite crowd that I used to hang out with, because the idiom of Countdown is the idiom of 21st century media. It's a mixture of incredibly stupid entertainment and incredibly insightful analysis. And the fact that he has as his role model, you know, the guy who every night would say 30, 40, 50 years ago, good night and good luck, is really interesting because he is doing extraordinary editorials. And I think it was Olbermann's editorials before the election of November 7th, 2006 that precipitated this cultural shift where more people realized that if they went out to the polls and they didn't vote, nothing would change. And startlingly, They did get out. They did vote in such numbers that the attempts at rigging the polls simply do not work, because they cannot work if the disparity is too great. They only work when you're at a 50-50. Then a few percentage points and you can steal the election. You can steal the culture. You can steal the consciousness. Well, it didn't work in 2006 in November. And what did we get? We got a sea-state change. There are Republicans now jumping off the ship of state in droves. They have the rear guard has stymied the efforts to get this resolution against the surge in Iraq, and so there's a whole body of Republicans who are going to vote with their feet and who are going to break cloture, which means they're going to be able to actually have an up or down vote on a resolution, and they're now talking about attaching to every single bill that goes to the House and Senate a vote against the escalation of the war. That was unthinkable even a year ago. Unthinkable. And when you see the mainstream changing, I mean, I come to these things and I talk to these people, you people, us people, and it's like speaking to the choir. It's wonderful. It's a love fest. You know, you get a lot of positive reinforcement, but it's not going to change the mainstream. And unless we change the mainstream, nothing really will change. Now, I agree with Sean. The change begins at home. But I like to reach for the stars, I mean, metaphorically and physically. And I want to change the culture in which I live because, frankly, I want a better culture. I would like to be able to be here past 2012. Okay? I want to see what happens when we go through the hourglass. Because the physics says that things are coming to, I used that term before, a nodal point, a preeminent, extraordinary change. And the reason there's so much ferment in the world right now, in my model, is because the unseen guys behind the scene are desperately trying to craft the public consciousness which will define the future we live in after we go through this nodal point of change. And they're trying to define it as a future of fear. Well, I got news. 2% apparently united people outweigh 98% of chaotic, fear-based people. All it takes, I keep telling Robin over and over again to the point of boredom, all it takes is 2%. Or to use that old Marin joke, you know how many psychiatrists it take to change a light bulb in Marin? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. All it takes is for those of us that really want change, link together coherence. And here's where I'm going to get to the physics part of this. Because as someone who has been interested in metaphysics for quite a while, but very disbelieving, very skeptical, because I come, of course, from a science background, what I have found, having gone through the Martian doorway, which is what I call my last 25 years of looking at ruins on Mars and ruins on the moon, which you're going to hear about tonight and more about on Monday night, I have found that there is this extraordinary legacy which has been bequeathed to us from those who came before. Now, I tend to agree with Sean that those who came before are probably us. That, you know, it's who would remember Telly Savalas and Kojak? Who loves you, baby? Well, who loves you best but yourself? Now, suppose you were of a time and an idiom and a culture that realized that you would come back and come back, Mr. DeMille, until you got it right. And you realized that there was this physics pacing events in the solar system, and that at some point there'd be this real interesting shift possible in one of two directions, predicated by the background matrix in which we're all immersed called reality, 3D reality, and that this was part of a cyclic thing which has as one of the key cycles this 26,000-year precession because of the alignment between the Earth and the Sun and the center of the galaxy, which is 26,000 light years, by the way, beyond the Sun, Daniel, just so you get that right, okay?
Well, I keep you around.
Thanks. It's all about alignments, okay? And suppose that group of people realized, because they had that insight and they had that science and it had been extraordinarily ancient when they were conceived into this reality, that they would unfortunately be back here. It happened again, and that bad things could happen, so they better leave themselves